And this is nothing that I prepared for, but Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, do you remember when he wanted to be our vice president and was bragging that all of these types of new small businesses were reasons why he should be trusted with leading? Yes. And now we're determining what all these small businesses like the Leering Center were. He used this as a reason that he gave the American people of why he should leave. So why are we surprised that immediately he's defensive? And
welcome back to Freedom Forge, where we examine the debates shaping America, challenge government officials to answer difficult questions, and defend the principle that government must remain accountable to the people who fund it. Before we get into this exchange, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Freedom Forge, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our coverage of major congressional hearings, government accountability battles, and the political stories that deserve a closer look. The Senate hearing you're about to see centers on allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse involving taxpayer-funded programs, along with a broader debate over government oversight and election integrity. During the exchange, a Republican senator questions witnesses about alleged fraud uncovered by independent investigators, criticizes the political response to those allegations, discusses legislation designed to combat fraud, and eventually turns the conversation toward voter registration and election administration. And there's a lot to unpack here.
Senator Moody.
Mr. Chairman, I think this is one of the most important hearings that we have had since I'm one of the newest United States senators, which just proves that the least senior people can actually move and be the loudest. This is one of the most important things that we could be doing right now as a Congress. And it comes right to me, another Republican, because there's not another Democrat here to question any of you who represent a wide swath of the political spectrum, I imagine, on what is happening right now in our country. And I appreciate my colleague, Senator Ernst. We are going to miss her immensely in her fight against fraud and waste in this country. I am going to miss her immensely. As many of you know, she is retiring from the Senate, but I thank her for putting up these tweets as a reminder. And Nick Shirley, you spoke about this. I love that you are, by the way, 24 years old, and you took something you started, I want to say as young as 16 or something, disrupting things. And man, does this bureaucracy and I would say cover up need disrupting. And boy, does it take somebody like you that is fine with that because you're driven by passion for protecting your generation, because you're coming after all of us and will feel this immensely in the debt that you inherit. And I am so grateful to you for showing up here and showing that no matter your age, no matter where you're from, Americans should demand that their government is accountable to them and are good stewards of their money. And boy, am I so impressed by you, and I hope that your family is as well. But I'm so glad that we have these, because I just want to point out, and this is nothing that I prepared for, but Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, do you remember when he wanted to be our vice president and was bragging that all of these types of new small businesses were reasons why he should be trusted with leading? Yes. And now we're determining what all these small businesses like the Leering Center were. He used this as a reason that he gave the American people of why he should leave. So why are we surprised that immediately he's defensive and comes after a young kid that's trying to point out on behalf of his generation where this money is really going and this fraud? And look at what the leader of California said. Did he really say, in response to you uncovering just astronomical fraud and waste, that, and I want to quote this because I am appalled by it, did he really say slow surely is the fraud?
Yes, he did.
I didn't misread that? That wasn't misprinted?
No.
So
directly from
somebody that wants to be the leader of the Democratic Party and show his great, I guess, character is demeaning you and calling you names and ridiculing you? Really?
Yes, that is Gavin Newsom.
I would suggest that anyone could see what this is. This is, oh my goodness, we just got caught. Let's throw out a bunch of blood in the water, go after other people, make sure people blame it on somebody else, but don't pay attention to us. What is that, like ink?
Yes, and actually Gavin Newsom just yesterday, he's giving now $20 million to a local journalist. They're going to be able to get grants up to $250,000 to do journalism inside of California. He's essentially paying for good press with our tax dollars as well.
I have to also commend my other colleague, Mr. Johnson, who was saying, you know, in California, instead of the Stop Nick Shirley Act, they should call it Protect Fraudsters Act. I mean, truly, this should be a wake-up call to everyone in America that the people that the Dems want to put in charge of their parties and in charge of their government, as soon as something is brought to their attention in a good faith way, their response is not to say, let's roll up our sleeves and dig in. The response is to say, nothing to see here. The person that bringing up is, let me make sure I have this, slow and a fraud himself. And let's propose legislation not only so that we can keep covering it up, but that we can go after them.
Yes, and I wanted this to be on the record. Never once has a Democrat politician ever congratulated me or said, thank you for exposing this, or even reached out to say, hey, maybe come check out what's happening inside of our state. They are, quite frankly, complicit in the fraud. And that's why none of them are here today. Like,
maybe
what is this?
Complicit, trying to cover up something, aiding and abetting,
100%.
promoting their own political careers over tax-paying, hardworking Americans. I thank you. You know, there is an entire fraud economy. I thank President Trump and his administration that is uncovering this. It's positive news that they're uncovering more and more of it, but it is sad that we are seeing so much of it. When I came to Washington, I was like, we need to take a machete to all of the bureaucracy, all of the, this has always been, there's always, every time I bring up a problem, the Dem response is, we've always had fraud, or we've always had coercion of individuals, or we've always had this, but they never once say, let's do something about it. So I would actually ask my colleagues, I have proposed in response to this, if we want to do something about it, if we want to be aggressive, we need to start proposing solutions. I thank my colleague, Senator Ernst. I've also proposed the Stop Child Care Scams Act, the Stop Fraud and Medicaid Act, the No Aid for Ghost Students Act, Punishing Healthcare Fraudsters Act. This is just a few that we are working on with my colleague, Senator Schmidt. We have launched a Senate task force against fraud. And I know they don't like to talk about fraud. They get really itchy when we talk about any kind of fraud, especially election fraud. Especially election fraud. And instead of saying, okay, let's explore what people are saying, or trying to discredit them, or picking someone that knows nothing about it when they come into hearing and saying, did President Trump win the election? The person would have no way of knowing, and making them say that, and see, they said that. Instead of actually exploring fraud and doing something about it, I think we need to make sure that we don't just we don't just address it, we don't just ask what we can do, but we bolster the American people's trust in our elections. And the way we do that is to follow the Florida blueprint. We used to be a national embarrassment with the hanging chads, getting ballot results after everybody went to sleep, days later. Within just 2 decades, we've turned that around. We have results by bedtime. People trust Florida elections. We can do that in this nation, which is why I want to propose legislation that says ballots by election day. Ballots by election day. So people have faith in the results of their elections. Mr. O'Keefe, and I'm over time, but is this something you think would bring better trust by Americans in our elections if we could announce results by election day, ballots in by election days, excluding military, of course?
Senator, I do. Citizenship verification answers whether a person is eligible, but it does not answer whether the applicant is that person. And that's what we saw in California. So federal reform should require identity to be verified before a registration gets active. I think Congress should look at that as well.
Thank you. And thank you for being here today, all of you. We very much appreciate it.
Senator,
One of the first things that stands out is the senator's frustration over the lack of Democratic senators participating in this portion of the hearing. She essentially argues that if fraud involving taxpayer money is serious enough to warrant a Senate hearing, lawmakers from both parties should be interested in determining what happened. On that basic principle, she has a point. Fraud should not be Republican or Democratic. If somebody steals taxpayer money under a Republican administration, investigate it. If somebody steals taxpayer money under a Democratic administration, investigate it. If a private organization submits fraudulent claims to obtain government funding, investigate it. And if government officials knowingly ignore warning signs, Congress should determine why. Taxpayer money doesn't belong to politicians. It comes from millions of Americans who work, run businesses, pay taxes, and expect the government to use those resources responsibly. The senator then focuses heavily on 24-year-old independent content creator Nick Shirley and praises him for investigating suspected fraud. Regardless of what anybody thinks about Shirley politically, there is a larger point here worth discussing. Investigative scrutiny does not have to come exclusively from giant media organizations. Technology has completely changed journalism. A person with a camera, publicly available records, interviews, and enough determination can sometimes identify questions that major institutions have overlooked. But there also needs to be an important standard. Finding something suspicious isn't automatically proof of criminal fraud. That's why allegations should be documented, investigated, and tested against evidence. Government agencies, inspectors general, prosecutors, and courts ultimately have roles in determining whether laws were actually broken. That distinction matters because accountability becomes stronger when it is based on evidence rather than political assumptions. Then the hearing moves directly into politics. The senator brings up Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and argues that programs and businesses once promoted as examples of economic success deserve additional scrutiny when allegations of fraud emerge around government-funded operations. The underlying question is legitimate. When politicians celebrate programs that receive taxpayer funding, what responsibility do they have when those programs later face serious allegations? Political leaders should not necessarily be blamed personally for every criminal act committed under a program they supported. Government is enormous, and no governor or president personally supervises every recipient of public money. But politicians absolutely can be questioned about whether adequate safeguards existed. Were applications verified? Were businesses inspected? Were payments audited? Did officials respond to warning signs? Were whistleblowers ignored? Those are the questions Congress should pursue. And then we get to Gavin Newsom. According to the discussion during the hearing, Newsom responded critically to Shirley's work, including the phrase, "slow Shirley." This is where political communication often becomes counterproductive. If somebody presents allegations involving public money, attacking that person's intelligence or credibility without fully addressing the evidence does not resolve the underlying issue. Show where the investigation is wrong. Produce the records. Explain the payments. Demonstrate that the businesses actually provided the services taxpayers paid for. If the allegations are false, evidence should establish that. If the allegations are true, prosecute the people responsible. That should be the standard regardless of party. Shirley then makes an extremely serious accusation. He claims Democratic politicians are effectively complicit because, according to him, none have contacted him to thank him, investigate alongside him, or invite him to examine similar problems in their states. That allegation deserves careful treatment. Failure to congratulate an investigator is not, by itself, evidence that a politician is complicit in fraud. Complicity requires evidence. However, Shirley's broader frustration raises an important political question. Are elected officials equally enthusiastic about investigating fraud when the investigation could embarrass their own party? That question applies to Republicans too. Government accountability only works when lawmakers are willing to investigate their allies as aggressively as their opponents. Otherwise, oversight becomes political theater. The senator then talks about what she describes as an entire fraud economy. That phrase should concern every taxpayer. Government programs frequently involve enormous amounts of money distributed across thousands of organizations, contractors, healthcare providers, educational institutions, and individuals. Whenever government creates a large funding program, criminals have an incentive to figure out how to exploit it. That means fraud prevention cannot simply happen after billions of dollars have already disappeared. Verification needs to happen before money leaves the government. Auditing needs to happen continuously. Suspicious payment patterns need to trigger reviews. Organizations receiving millions in taxpayer funding should be able to demonstrate that the services they billed taxpayers for were actually provided. And when deliberate fraud is proven, consequences should be serious enough to discourage others from attempting the same thing. The senator says she has introduced or supported several measures targeting suspected fraud, including proposals she calls the Stop Child Care Scams Act, Stop Fraud in Medicaid Act, No Aid for Go Students Act, and Punishing Healthcare Fraudsters Act. The names certainly communicate the intended message. But Americans should always go beyond the name of a bill. Read what the legislation actually does. Does it strengthen verification? Does it improve audits? Does it give agencies useful fraud detection tools? Does it protect innocent beneficiaries from being wrongly removed from programs? Does it recover stolen taxpayer money? Does it establish meaningful penalties? And perhaps most importantly, can the government implement it effectively? Washington has passed plenty of legislation with impressive names. Results matter more than branding. Then the hearing takes another turn when the senator connects the broader discussion about fraud to election integrity. This is one of the most sensitive political subjects in America, and it deserves precision. The senator points to Florida's election administration and argues that Americans should have greater confidence that ballots are received and processed promptly enough for results to become available quickly. She proposes the principle of ballots by election day, while mentioning an exception involving military voters. There are really two separate questions here. The first is how quickly election results should be reported. The second is how states should establish deadlines for legally cast ballots. Those are not necessarily identical issues. States have different election laws, different rules surrounding absentee voting, and different procedures for processing ballots. But the senator's broader argument about public confidence is worth examining. Americans should be able to understand exactly how their elections operate. Registration rules should be clear. Voter eligibility requirements should be clear. Ballot deadlines should be clear. Counting procedures should be transparent. Observers should understand the process. Election officials should explain delays rather than allowing an information vacuum to develop. And legitimate eligible voters should be able to cast their ballots without unnecessary obstacles. Then witness Mr. O'Keefe makes another important distinction. He argues that citizenship verification answers whether someone is eligible, but identity verification addresses whether the applicant is actually the person they claim to be. Those are different questions. Identity verification is already a normal part of countless important transactions in American life. The policy challenge is creating election safeguards that improve security while ensuring eligible citizens are not improperly prevented from registering or voting. That is where serious lawmakers should concentrate their efforts. What I find most important about this entire hearing is something much bigger than one senator, Nick Shirley, Tim Walz, Gavin Newsom, or even one alleged fraud scheme. It is the relationship between citizens and government. Americans hand enormous amounts of money and authority to government institutions. In return, citizens have every right to demand receipts. Where did the money go? Who received it? What service did they provide? Who verified the claims? Who performed the audit? What happened when suspicious activity was detected? And who was held accountable when something went wrong? Those should not be controversial questions. Government transparency should not depend on which political party controls Washington. Imagine how much healthier American politics would become if both parties agreed on one basic rule. Whenever credible evidence of fraud appears, investigate it completely, even when the findings could politically hurt your own side. Republicans should accept that standard. Democrats should accept that standard. Governors should accept it. Presidents should accept it. Federal agencies should accept it. And Congress should enforce it. At the same time, independent investigators and political commentators also have responsibilities. Accusations should be backed by documentation. Suspicion should not automatically be presented as guilt. Political disagreement should not automatically become evidence of corruption. Evidence has to remain the foundation, because once accountability becomes nothing more than another partisan weapon, Americans stop trusting the investigations themselves. That would be disastrous. The United States needs aggressive oversight, but it also needs credible oversight. It needs lawmakers willing to ask uncomfortable questions. It needs journalists willing to investigate powerful institutions. It needs inspectors general with enough independence to follow evidence wherever it leads. And it needs prosecutors willing to pursue actual fraud regardless of the political affiliation of the people involved. That is the standard Washington should be held to. The American taxpayer should never be treated like an unlimited ATM. Every dollar wasted through incompetence is a dollar Americans work to earn. Americans deserve institutions they can trust. But trust cannot simply be demanded by politicians. It has to be earned through transparency, competence, and accountability. And that's ultimately what I take away from this exchange. Whether you agree with every accusation made during this hearing or not, nobody should be afraid of legitimate investigation. If there is no fraud, prove it. If there is fraud, expose it. If public money was stolen, pursue those responsible. And if government systems made that fraud unnecessarily easy, fix those systems before taxpayers lose even more. That's the standard we should demand from Washington. This is Freedom Forge, and I want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe Congress is doing enough to combat fraud and waste involving taxpayer money? And what reforms would you support to make government programs and elections more transparent and trustworthy? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and keep the discussion focused on the facts. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit the like button, subscribe to Freedom Forge, and turn on notifications for more coverage of congressional hearings, government accountability, and the major political battles shaping America's future. Until next time, stay informed, question those in power, examine the evidence for yourself, and never forget that in a constitutional republic, government ultimately answers to the people.